All right, so welcome to the third video in my beginner copywriting series. So in the first video, I went over the definitions of what copywriting is. The last video, I discussed the importance of focusing on a very niche group to market to. And now in this video, I'm going to discuss, the third thing, the sort of third foundational thing, which is knowing your product. Seems somewhat obvious, I suppose, but knowing your product and your customer is going to be the key thing when coming up with the copy that you write. So today I'm going to focus on the product part first. If you are writing for your own product, so if you're creating copy for your own item that you're marketing, your own service, then this will be maybe a little bit easier. If you are working for, say, another organization or looking to get hired by an organization, you're going to need to know that organization's products basically inside and out. The detriment of your ad writing will probably be more due to your lack of knowledge of the product or the customer than your actual technical expertise in copywriting itself. If you can figure out your product and your customer to a very high degree, your skill as a copywriter doesn't necessarily need to have been the most experienced or the strongest. You can do passively well by just knowing your product and your customer really inside and out. So in this video, it's simply making a plea for you to know your product. And I will use the term product and brand somewhat interchangeably in this video. It's kind of the same thing to a degree. Your brand is more of like your general reputation, what someone thinks of the organization overall. The product is something very specific that the organization is offering. You need to know both, but I'm going to use both terms interchangeably in the video. So let's begin here. I'm going to lay out a series of questions for you, and what my hope basically is that you'll end up taking a pen and paper here and you'll write them down, and what you'll do with that is go through and answer them. And so these questions are designed to be somewhat probing. They're designed to make you think. And my hope is that if you can answer all of these, you'll know your product you'll the product, the brand to a sufficient level to be able to begin selling these products to a customer. All right, so I'm going to throw up the questions here on the screen in just a moment. First question, describe your company in 3 to 5 words. Now, I'm going to add a little thing onto that and say, when describing your company, you cannot use the word provider, solution, or innovative. These are very general terms. I want specificity out of you. Really take your time and think about 3 to 5 specific words that describe your brand and your company. All right, question number 2 is, why should anyone care about your product or service? Obviously, this is somewhat simply stated as, what problem does your product or service solve? Or what value does it add to the marketplace? Third question, who is your typical customer? So going through just your customer demographics, you don't need to be too specific, but you'll need to know, their ID, their average income level, the age, industry role, education level, any kind of like pain points, if they're urban or more suburban, just the general demographics of who your customers are. Next question is, who are your closest competitors and what makes you better? And here's the point where you need to be somewhat harsh with yourself and honestly ask yourself, are you the better product? Does what do you offer the better service, the better product? And if not, there's a certain level of honesty that you need to kind of embrace in that. Where do you do better? So what elements of the market do you satisfy better? We're trying to narrow down what our target customer is going to be. So it helps to know where your competitor is stronger than you. So that way we can try and tailor the product towards maybe areas that your competitor is lacking in. But it comes first to the honesty of does your competitor do something better? And if so, why? And if not, why are you better than them? Okay, next question. This is a bit hipsterish, but if your brand was a person, how would you describe them? Again, it's probably one of those that I imagine if you're coming at this from a very traditional sort of mindset, this is probably kind of a weird question. But again, knowing your brand is going to matter a lot when it comes to the copy. So if your organization, your company, your service, your product, if it was a person, describe them. So are they a bit more of like, a bit more traditional, conservative, more progressive minded person? Are they more casual, professional, outspoken, reserved, a industry leader or an underdog, thrifty or affluent? Come up with some characteristics basically that describe the brand. So that way you'll understand how it is to you. But I also want you to think about how your brand is perceived by others as well. So, in other words, how are your competitors perceived in relation to you? Does your vision of what the company looks like, does that match what your customers think? Do your customers see your company in the same light? What helps too is if you're part of, like, say, like a larger organization, if you're not just doing this for yourself, ask them. Like, ask your workers, hey, listen, how would you describe this company if it was a person? And then, this is a chance basically where you can ask, half a dozen, 2 dozen people, or potentially an entire office floor. Ask them and compare the notes and see, all right, hey, how does this brand speak to you? And you can kind of put that data together. But getting an idea of what your company would be in terms of characteristics is going to help when it comes to marketing the product. All right, so question number 7, what other brand voices do you admire and what do you like about them? And I'm going to add a caveat right away. You cannot say Apple. It seems like every single person that I've ever asked this question to, Apple becomes like the main thing. And this obviously was much bigger, a decade or so back when Steve Jobs was still alive. But think of brands that you like, national, organizations, whatever it might be, and why do you like them? Are they innovative? What about them strikes you? And it doesn't necessarily need to be companies. It can be, we kind of live in the age of, influencers right now. so if your product basically is more, if your brand basically is more like an individual person, a service, or just like an individual themselves, what do you admire about them? What is it about this person that you tend to like in terms of quality? And finally, last question. Who would your ideal spokesperson be? Now, this is fictitious, so money is of no object. So don't limit yourself there. But just think of, all right, if I had all the resources available to me and I could hire this one person, who would I want to hire to represent my brand? It can be an industry leader, a celebrity. If you're maybe a local company, like a local organization, maybe a local hero, athlete. Who basically do you want out there championing your product? And I'm going to add a caveat here as well. You cannot say Don Draper. I think John Hamm is the actor from Mad Men. Funny anecdote. I had a friend of mine that works for a copywriting agency, and she told me years ago, back when that TV show was popular, that every company that ever came to her organization and they hired them and she asked this question, they would always say Don Draper every single time. And I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? It's the very classical, I guess, golden era of advertising in a way, sort of characteristic there, right? But I want you to not use that as your go-to. So think of something a bit more creative, a bit more specific. Don't just stick with Don Draper because he represents this sort of golden era advertising ideal. Okay, so that is it. I think I might have actually numbered these out of order. I think maybe it's only like 7 questions. I might have misnumbered them, so I do apologize. But for this video, I want you to go through, write all 8 questions down, go through them, and ideally set it aside and go through it a second time, maybe like a day later, and sort of refine this. The more specific you can be with your answers on this, the easier everything else is going to be. But that's basically it for this video. If you can answer every single one of those questions to a pretty high and pretty specific degree, you know your product. You'll know your service inside and out, and it'll be easier to now market it towards a certain customer later on. So tomorrow's video will be on that. I'll actually dive into more of the specifics on kind of finding your ideal customer. But for now, for this video, go through these steps first of answering these questions and then move on to the next video after that.